Hey guys, this is the last video in this series. It's going to be the actual JavaScript portion. So we're going to make sure our actual dropdowns and toggling of the menu will work. And a lot of times I'll find myself reaching for libraries just to do these simple things. And then I finally said, you know what, I'm going to roll my own. I'm going to figure this out and do it. And that's what I did. So that's why I'm showing you this. And I wanted to share how I came about making it. And there's only a few really functions and stuff. I don't know how many lines. So I got 60, 70 lines of code to do all that I need for the menu. So that's nice. So we have our HTML, CSS already set up in the last video. Sorry that last one was so long. I'll probably try to condense it if you're watching this. If it was lengthy, forgive me. But I wanted to make it a realistic example as opposed to just slopping something together, So what I'm going to work on in this video is the JavaScript. We have our app.js file in our dev folder. Currently, Gulp is looking for that, and it's going to compile it into the dist application.min file here. You could use const and let on JavaScript, but you will need to modify the Gulp file to accommodate ES6. I don't have that currently going. If you want to use a different thing like Webpack or something like that, feel free. I don't really do that much static-based sites, so it's one of those things that I either install a CLI or just have already a framework in mind. But I might reach for that in the future, so we'll see as this series progresses. So the first thing I want to do is reach into the DOM and find our actual primary nav. So I'm going to use this class here as a target to find all the actual links in our menu. So to start, we'll go var dropdown equals document dot query selector all, and it's going to be nav. I'll explain this in a minute. Nav.dropdown A. So it's looking in every dropdown within nav.js. So we've got nav.js, and then there's quite a few dropdowns. There's one there, there's one there, and then within that there's list items, but there's also A tags, which is what it's actually targeting. And that's where this is reaching for, all of those. And that's telling me what are actually the dropdown links. So the actual menu we also need to target equals drop document dot query selector. This is just going to be a singular, but still select the drop down menu. Okay, so now we have our variable set up, and that's reaching for this. Okay, so next we need to loop through each of those links because we need to figure out what dropdown is associated to what click, so we know which one to display as a user interacts with it, as opposed to showing them all at once, which would be bad. So let's do a for loop, and we're going to set a variable of x equal to 0. X is going to be less than the dropdown length, so however many dropdowns there are. In this case, I could probably have a better name here. It'd be like drop down link. And then we can do x++ to iterate over everything. And then within that we'll do a few things. So drop down, get the current iteration, and then we'll add an event listener to it. Click, and pass in an anonymous function with the event. So we want to capture that click event, and that's what's being passed through right there. Make sure you use a semicolon. And then we want to define a new target that is the dropdown itself. And this is going to be this.next element sibling. So let's do some diagnosing here, like how did I know to do that? Let's see. So console.log e for one thing. If we do this, I'll open up DevTools. I'm in Firefox now. I just prefer it at the moment, so you guys can use whatever you like. If we get that click, we have the target, and that's the actual event. Within the click, you can see all of those things. There's the original target. What was the other one we were looking for? Next element sibling. I think I need to look at related target. Yeah, so target. Within target, you have more, which is crazy. But then there's this next element sibling property that I found, which is the actual drop-down menu, which is what I wanted to target in the first place. So that's how I'm finding these things. I'm just reaching in the DOM, looking in the actual event, and then finding what it is I can actually extract from it to use. So that is it right there. I don't think in Chrome you can do this, and that's a big reason I just switched for this video. So it's kind of a bummer, but now we have that. So I'm assigning that event to this, which is our iterative element. So now I have that as a variable to use where I want to. So next we need to do an if statement. So if we say the event's target, so whatever we click on, next element sibling is not equal to null. And if this is just a weird keystroke, if you just put exclamation point equals, it's not equals to, but my automatically does it. I know there's a name, I'm just blanking. But if that's not null, we want to hide the dropdown. Okay, so then we will do that by taking the dropdown target we define above, get the class list from it, and then toggle hidden. And this is all basic JavaScript. So that's what's awesome right now. The latest modern JavaScript's kind of like jQuery already. You don't have to reach for so many simpler methods, but the stuff exists to do these things that you used to do in jQuery. So on top of toggling the class list, so in this case it's already opening, so that's great. So we're toggling that hidden class that's already on the dropdown menu right there, if you see it. So it's hidden right now. That's by default. I put those in the actual HTML, and then I'm toggling that class with JavaScript. So now we have access to our elements here. This one should work too. Granted, they're both open right now. I don't want them to do that. I actually want them to close based on, you know, each click. So no two drop downs should be open at the same time, in my opinion. So on top of that, there are some accessibility stuffs I want to do. So I'm going to toggle aria expanded true here. So I made a function outside of this that's called aria toggle, and we'll pass in this, so we can always use this elsewhere if we want to. So we have our if statement. Outside of that, we're going to go completely outside of this loop and then define this function aria toggle, and then pass in whatever you're toggling, which would be this, which I just passed in here. So in this case, we'll take if toggle.set or get attribute, so you can get the attributes on it. If I can spell or talk. And then we already set this, so aria expanded. And then we'll say is equal to false. So if you look on the drop down here, we have aria expanded is false. It's already set to that. So we're saying if it is, then we'll do these things. Toggle dot set attribute aria expanded, and then we'll pass in true. Then you can do an else toggle set attribute aria expanded false. So that no matter what, each time you're toggling, that stuff will now toggle. So reload the page and something's off. Alright, so I guess that was a fluke. I don't know. It's working now. So if I toggle that, you'll see everything happening the way we want. If we look in the inspector and see, let's find that element. ARIA expanded is true right now. Watch it again. False. True, false. So we're toggling two different things right now, and I think that's pretty sweet. I'll zoom in on that for you guys. So that's what's going on. That's just for accessibility, and I think you should worry about that. So there. Okay, aside from ARIA attributes, we want to also target, basically when you click on a drop down, I want you to be able to click on the outside, and anytime you click away from it, the drop down should close. And this is more mathematical than anything, so this is kind of a conundrum to get, but I did figure it out. Some Stack Overflow articles helped, I'll admit, but we're gonna work through it. So hide click outside. So we're passing in this again, and then we also want to prevent default on the entire event. So this is kind of comes bundled with JavaScript. It allows you to just say disable what normally a link would do. That way it doesn't redirect anywhere if someone passed in a URL or something. Okay, so this is also a function that we're referencing outside of the loop, which we'll do here. So we'll define it as the same name, hide on click outside. So this one will actually also reference another function outside of it. It's kind of a doozy, so bear with me, but we're going to pass in the element itself. And within that, we're going to define a variable called outside click listener. Is going to be a function, pass in that event. So then we do this kind of if checking here. So if the element contains if the element does not contain the event target and not being because of this, we're going to do another if element and element dot offset width or offset height or element, let me move me up here, get client recs. So that's, you can grab the API to get that stuff. So that's kind of part of the browser. So this is what I kind of sourced on Stack Overflow, because I wanted to figure out how to determine how the browser knows where you're clicking and not clicking, or where you shouldn't be clicking. So that's how this happened. So then we're going to reach for the element again. Next element sibling dot classless. We'll just toggle that class again. So we're just doing what we did before. Toggle hidden. And then also removing the click listener, which is what I meant when I mentioned we're going to create another function outside of this one. So that will be below here. It'll actually be within this function, but we're going to do var remove click listener equals function. So we're assigning the function a variable in this case, and then we'll document dot remove event listener click, and then pass in that outside click listener function. And the same is true below. So we're adding it here, but we're moving it here, which is actually referenced here. So if that's not confusing, this is what actually is going on. So outside click listener, comma there. Cool. So that's the gist of it. So like we're basically saying when you click outside of the element, we want to hide the dropdown in short. But to determine that, you need to basically find the coordinates on the window that aren't the drop down right here. And that's also not the target itself. It doesn't contain the target, and it isn't the element on the screen. If it isn't, then we'll go ahead and toggle that class to say hidden again, and it will remove that drop down. We'll also remove the click listener, if I can spell. So basically it knows there's no more events happening on that element, so it doesn't bubble up in the shorter span of things. That's basically handling our drop downs. So at this point, if we refresh, click here, if I click off, it works. Do it again. So you notice I can't open one or the other at the same time now. They're competing each other in a good way. So that's the drop down portion. That's how much code it took, and it was basically, it makes sense as you see it. I did have to reference, of course, this part here. Other than that, it made more sense as I started typing it. You know, it's what troubles me about JavaScript, but I think I'm starting to understand it more, and I think I'm loving it because it does what your Bootstrap can do in as little as 48 lines of code, and I think that's pretty cool. So on top of that, to make this thing full circle, we still don't have our full mobile menu to be active on mobile. So let's go ahead and work on that now. I'm going to make a function. In fact, I'm going to wrap this in a function just to give it some scope. We'll just call it Dropdown. You could probably go about this in many different ways. I'm just doing this for the sake of this demo, though. You might want to namespace it. You might want to make it a class. All those things, or a prototype. This one will be function toggle nav. Let's see, we want to get all the toggles that have the data attribute toggle on them. So to do that, we can do var nav toggles equals document.query selector all, similar to what we did before. So we'll look for the data toggle, and you don't have to use quotes here, you can just do toggle and close that. So if we do console.log, enter down here, we'll go into our console and see how many show up. I think there should be like 2. This needs to run though, so I need to run Dropdowns too, or call it, I should say. And I could just call it down here. There we go. So it comes back as a node list. There is 1. So cool. That makes sense because there's only 1 menu. I was thinking 2 for some reason. Alright, so there's that. If we ever have more than 1 menu, that's where that would apply, and it makes it more scalable, so you don't want to kind of work yourself into a corner there. So then we'll take each of those and do a for each loop. And with this, you can pass in a function of which has a actual property, and we'll set some variables. So we'll say menu target equals toggle.dataset.target. So how did I get that? I did a console.log toggle. E.data is undefined. Where did I write E? Anyway, this is showing what we want. Within that, I went to find the data set attribute, which is the toggle, and then I actually want to reference the target in this case. So the target is actually setting the string of the ID of the div that I want to find. So with that, the nav content right there, I can actually query the DOM for that div by using this, as opposed to just doing it outright. This is kind of more dynamic in this case. So no matter what menu you define, if say you make a new div that has a different ID, it will still target that ID as opposed to just finding that one ID each time. So it's more dynamic. You can basically replace this like a hot swap. So let me do collapse var collapse. So this is going to be the main menu. So this is what we're doing, what I was just referencing. We can pass in menu targets. So now we can pass in that ID that's dynamically written in our HTML. So each time we define a new menu, it doesn't overwrite itself when we have to reach for JavaScript again to go find it. So it's kind of already doing that. So then we'll grab the toggle and add an event listener, and it's going to be click. And we'll pass in an anonymous function. And then within that, we'll take collapse since we defined it and toggle the class list dot toggle, and then we'll append that show class. And if you recall a video back, we added that class to our element right here. So we're toggling that class with this. And I have an error somewhere and it's like bugging me. Alright guys, so I had a typo and it was just an event kind of thing going on, so it wasn't really anything that wasn't already trivial. All in all, that's it for the actual menu. So we've got our toggle nav, we've got our drop down function. These you can encapsulate into classes and maybe reuse them a little better, so you can pass in, say, the elements you want the drop down to target. It could be way more reusable is what I'm getting at. So think about that when you build something like this. Always think about, well, how could I reuse this later? Because when you get into the pattern of just using it for that one case, you're already selling yourself short later. But that's to say, what if you only have one primary menu ever? Then this should work. So that's kind of the approach I took, and I'm digging it. So we have two different theme menus. So we have our mobile menu now, and everything should be square. So we've got drop downs, they're flexing, so that's good. The account actually does too, so that's awesome. So the drop downs work, our toggle works, and it's all with about, what, 70 lines of JavaScript and quite a bit of CSS, sadly. But for that kind of component, you could definitely extend it and make it more reusable. And recommend taking a look at that just to show you the light theme again once more. We can do that. So just change this class. There we go. So we got our drop downs there. Same here. And see how it looks responsive. Cool. So the mobile version could probably use some TLC. Like I would probably have these be full width, but all in all, it's looking okay to me. So I like it. Awesome, guys. So we made it pretty far. There's a lot that I covered in 4 short videos, or not short, but 4 videos of building a realistic example of a navigation using drop downs, responsiveness, and the actual mobile menu concept. So hopefully you like this. Hopefully it was enticed you to kind of approach JavaScript with a new light. I'm still learning myself. A lot of what I showed you was stuff that I kind of just had to study and figure out, and then do a ton of console.logs to figure out what these things are and why they exist, like next element sibling. I had no idea what the hell that was when I first started this, but I learned a lot, and it was neat to see it all come together. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them. I'm no expert at this, the JavaScript side of things, so I'm learning. Keep that in mind. But if you have any pointers, feel free to have those as well. I'm trying to stay away from jQuery and frameworks right now, and just focus on pure JavaScript and creating things with that I tend to use in my day-to-day. So that's it. Hopefully you enjoyed this. As always, if you could like or subscribe in the video, that'd be great. Make sure you go on the GitHub to get this code because I'm going to have it all there. You can use it and manipulate it however you want. So that's it. All right.